Critiques are the newest development in debate argumentation and theory. There's a wide variety of ideas and evidence that could be used to substantiate a critique. This video will go over the very basic tenets that is common to most every critique. Critiques offer a different way of negating the affirmative. To understand how critiques are different, we need to examine what was the dominant paradigm of debate for so long: policymaking. Policymaking is a problem-oriented approach to debate. The affirmative would identify a problem and propose a solution. The plan is the focus of the debate. The judge determines whether the plan is better than the status quo or a competitive option. The key plan-focused argument for the negative is the disadvantage. Disadvantages, and advantages as well, must be unique. The consequence must be caused by the plan, and only the plan. In this paradigm, links are causal chains. A causes B. Both teams will offer up different claims and evidence to support uniqueness and link arguments, but they fundamentally agree that they are debating about the consequences of the plan. Critiques shift this mode of evaluation away from the policymaking paradigm to focus on the assumptions, methods, or values that underlie or were put into the affirmative case to make it seem desirable. The first part of the critique is a link. Despite the common phrase with disadvantages, link does not mean the same thing in this context. Links for critiques are examples within the 1AC that highlight the assumptions, methods, or values that are the target of criticism. Critique links are not unique. For example, let's say the affirmative is to implement a carbon tax. Our solvency argument for the affirmative is that if the tax is high enough, companies will do the efficient thing and adopt renewable energy to avoid paying the tax, since they want to maximize profit and minimize cost. A negative critique could be that this idea that tweaking the market forces to arrive at a socially optimal benefit is problematic because it's a key tenet of neoliberal economics. It's not the case that the affirmative is creating neoliberal economics for the first time. That is why this argument is not called the neoliberal disadvantage. The negative is saying that the F shares the assumptions or values of neoliberal economics. Critique links are examples, not causes. If critique links are not unique and are just examples, why do they matter? It brings us to the second main part of a critique: framework. Framework provides a reason to evaluate debates differently than in a world of plan focus. A lot of framework arguments stem from the difference between problem-solving theory and critical theory. Critical theory does not take things such as institutions, social organization, distribution of resources, or power relations as a given, while problem-solving theory tries to improve the operations of existing systems while taking them as givens. Framework helps distinguish which questions are relevant and what to prioritize when resolving those questions. Framework-type arguments are not exclusive to critique debating, but you will seldom encounter or argue a critique without some framework element to it. The third part of a critique is the impact. Unlike links, critique impacts are similar to disadvantage impacts. Critique impacts stem from the object of critique that informs the values, assumptions, or methods being criticized. In our neoliberal economics example, there could be a host of reasons provided why that system of economics is bad. It could destroy the environment, or encourage resource conflict, or create structural poverty, or dehumanize people. Usually, some element of the framework argument helps bolster the negative's impact to the judge. The final part of a critique is the alternative. Since each link is an example of something the negative team deems as bad, it gives them an opportunity to say how things should be instead. Usually the first step is a reformulation or a rejection of the dominant or given way of approaching a certain problem or how to describe it. Then a different course of thinking, arguing, or acting is proposed. In our run-in example, the negative would propose an alternative way of dealing with environmental problems, or an alternative way of organizing the economy that doesn't follow neoliberal assumptions. The framework argument that they make may bolster the alternative by arguing that the type of actions the alternative takes should be prioritized over actions like the plan. To answer a critique, the affirmative can deploy a few different strategies. First, you can attack the alternative by saying it doesn't solve the AF's advantages or doesn't provide a useful solution to the object of the criticism. This works in a similar way to a counterplan. The AF would argue that the plan is necessary to resolve the harms, and since the alternative doesn't include the plan's action, that is a problem. Second, permutations. They start out similarly in critique debates as they do in counterplan debates. It's a question of combining the affirmative with all or parts of the alternative. But permutations beg the question of framework a large amount of the time. With counterplans, it's just a question of the plan action and the counterplan action. In critique debates, the affirmative might be responsible for much more than just the plan action, and thus would be combining things with the alternative the negative has said is bad. Sometimes, though, the alternative is argued in such a way that even despite doing the affirmative alongside the alternative can still resolve the reasons why the affirmative is bad. People call this overwhelming the link arguments. 3 is framework. At some point, the affirmative will have to defend the way that they have approached thinking or trying to solve the problem they have identified. Common affirmative framework arguments center around defending problem solving or pragmatism or methodological pluralism, which means taking competing academic viewpoints and putting them in productive tension with one another, rather than viewing them as a zero-sum choice. Finally is impacts. Sometimes the affirmative advantage impact is so large it still proves net beneficial to vote affirmative, even if the negative wins they align with problematic values or assumptions. Most often, the affirmative argues that warding off existential risk is the most important consideration, and only the plan can help do that. That's all we have about critiques for now, and that brings us to our last introductory explainer debate video. Part 15 of this video series will be a demonstration debate, so you can see all of these ideas in action. Thank you for watching our Introduction to Debate series.